Thank you for being on the Courage of a Leader podcast today, Brian.
Amy, every time we chat, it's always amazing. So to record this and put it out to the world, it's a privilege. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, me too. I appreciate your time. We're going to jump right into it. We are going to talk today about how do we connect powerfully with others. And I think that this is super important for a number of reasons. And I know that you help folks do this, even when they have significant obstacles in front of them. So I want to hear from you. What do
Yeah.
you mean by connecting powerfully with others, and why is this so important?
Well, if we look at it through the lens of like the human experience, I think we seek and desire, all of us, the same four things.
Okay.
We all want to feel safe.
Yeah.
We all want to feel protected, and those are not the same thing.
Okay.
We all want to feel seen and understood, and we all want to feel connected,
Yeah.
right? Connected to ourselves, connected to each other, connected to something bigger than ourselves. We all want that.
Yeah.
Okay. But here's the reality. Okay. The second we walk into an environment that we don't feel connected, we don't feel seen and understood, and there's not a clear level of protection that allows us to feel safe,
Yeah.
what do? We protect ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. So this might be going to a networking event where everyone's handing out business cards and everyone wants something from you instead of for you. Right. This could be going back to your parents' house for Thanksgiving or a holiday, and you know that your dad, your aunt, and your grandma are all going to look at you a certain way. They're going to make comments about you, and you already weeks before start hesitating and putting that guard and armor up and just trying to figure out how I'm going to get through.
Yeah.
Right. It could be a conflict with a spouse that leaves you feeling yucky, and now you got to go into a prospect meeting or lead your team. Okay. But once you've been activated into that state, your armor is up. Here's a visual that's going to help you and everybody else connect this. We talk about the trash from people's past. Okay. The trash from your past are those emotional triggers, behavioral patterns, and environmental conditioning that cause your cellular memory to activate and react in moments, often of which causes you to not see things as clearly in front of you and create a ripple effect of damage. Okay. So when we look at it through this, what's important to understand is the trash from your past is not your fault. It just becomes your responsibility once you become aware of it, or you start burying others in yours. You know those 35-gallon black trash bags?
Yeah.
Okay. I want you to imagine unfolding one flat on the table and grab the corners and pick it up. Hold it up in front of your face, above your eyes, right? That's your armor. That's your armor. Big black trash bag. So now my question for you, Amy, is how could you properly expect anyone in your life, right? Your spouse, kids, closest friends, colleagues, people that work for you, your clients, your communities. How could you ever expect anyone to see all of who you are, what you're willing to do, what you're not willing to do, your heart, your soul, your desire, your intent, your boundaries, your worth, your value, delivered through that opaque force field? Oh, and by the way, that's assuming that they're not already carrying their own layer of armor that's going to further dilute the message. Okay. So how does this show up in the world? I'll give a personal example. Okay. My wife would say something as simple as this. Hey, honey, what do you want to do with the kids this weekend? But my shame and my anger filter that created armor would cause me to hear it this way. Hey, honey, you've not done enough to be a good husband and father here recently. So what are you going to do to make up for it this weekend? Now, all of a sudden, my cells are activating. I feel that visceral response. I feel my heart start racing. My breath get shallow. I feel my chest expand, that wave of heat and emotion over me. And what do? I rattle off the 10 things I've done in the last 4 days to show her I'm a good husband and father when that wasn't even what she asked.
Yeah, just like I was asking about this weekend. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so when we look at this, how often in life are people in situations and positions where they don't feel seen? They don't feel understood. They don't feel connected. They don't feel like no matter what their truth is, that it's going to be accepted and understood, right?
Yeah.
That their intent is so often misunderstood, and yet they're always wondering why people can't seem to understand where they're coming from.
Yeah.
Here's the truth of all of it. The world will never judge you based on your intent.
Yeah.
The world will always judge you based on your actions, even if you're unconscious to them.
Yes.
So what does powerfully connecting mean? It's the only place I see as a possibility for us to have opportunity and growth, because we're dropping the armor and we're showing up open.
Okay, you said so much good stuff already, Brian. Why do we want to connect powerfully? Because the things that humans want the most is to feel safe, protected, seen and understood, and connected. And you said there's a difference between safe and protected. Let me double click there. Because we talk a lot about safety in the workplace, right? We want psychological safety because that's when people are going to be able to admit their mistakes and throw their ideas onto the table. I think this would be helpful to break this down and give us another lens. What's the difference between safe and protected?
Yeah. So safe is something that you can create for yourself or you can experience under someone else's guise.
Okay.
So what does that mean? Someone who holds space for you. Somebody who makes it so that you don't have to be paying attention to every single variable in detail. As a leader in a company, right? I can gaslight my employees
Mhm.
and they don't feel protected or safe.
Right.
Or, right, I can take vulnerability, authenticity. I can be a human being and I can stand up for and defend my teams, particularly when it's bad news, and let them celebrate in the wins. See, the reality of it is that if you recognize that the second you protect yourself, you actually disconnect yourself from the two things you want most,
Mhm.
which is to be seen and understood and to be connected, right? You also, the second you protect yourself, disconnect yourself from who you are and what you want in this world. And so the only way for us as leaders in families, in businesses, and in communities to show up and ensure that everyone gets everything that they want, which is all four of those things, it's to go into those environments and find a way to lower our armor by
Mm.
convincing ourselves that we're safe and we don't need the external protection. Now, what does that look like? It's twofold. One, we can fabricate it in a moment by
Okay.
literally intellectually convincing ourselves that we're safe,
Okay.
or we can do the deeper work to actually unpack and heal through the things that we're still unconsciously protecting. Great example. My reaction to my wife, what was I protecting? I value greatly being a good husband and a good father.
Mm-hmm.
I value greatly that they believe that I'm a good husband and father because that knows that I'm congruent in that approach. I felt like I'm being challenged there. That's what I'm protecting,
Okay.
right? So I'm now protecting myself, but that also means I'm disconnecting. So to be a protector and connector means to lower your own armor and wrap a layer of protection around the environment that you're in, protecting everyone in it so that everyone can be safe, everyone can be protected, everyone can be seen and understood, and everyone can be connected. What it requires you to do, though, it's to have what I call a strong spine and a soft front. A strong spine is I've done the work to know who I am, what I'm willing to do, what I'm not willing to do, my value, my worth, my desires, my boundaries, right? The ways that I communicate most effectively, my skill sets, my unique areas of brilliance. Because if I know all of that stuff and I've done the work to eradicate the shame and the anger and all those little underpinnings that keep us stuck, then I can walk into any environment and be unwavering because I don't have anything to justify, nothing to defend, no worry about criticism, judgment, because I'm good,
Yeah.
right? It's kind of like Eminem in the movie 8 Mile. If anybody has seen that, the very last rap scene, right? He goes off and talks about all the bad things that he knows his competitor is going to rip on him for. He goes first, he owns all of it, and then basically drops the mic and he's like, "So what do you got on me?"
Yeah.
Right? If
Yeah.
you don't have anything to hide, justify, defend, or protect, then you can be open. And that's where the soft front comes from. And I think of my wife and my kids in this scenario, but it applies to teams, right? If somebody wants to come to you for light, love, leadership, protection, they want to come to you to be consoled, they want to come to you to talk about something vulnerable, do they want to lay their head down on a metal chest piece of armor?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And so we have to be able to have that soft front because that's what makes our heart accessible. That's what makes our frequency and vibration accessible. And that's what makes the energy transfer.
Okay. A couple of things here. I think distinguishing that safe and that protected is an interesting thing because I was going to ask you the question, Brian, like, what if I'm on a team and like, there's evidence that my team leader's not going to have my back, right? Like I've seen this person, throw
Yeah,
people under the bus before. But this means that there's a part of it that we can do for ourselves. Like we know
correct.
who we are, we know the quality of our work. right? And I can stand in that. I can do that work to have that strong spine. And,
Mhm.
I don't have to add layers of protection and armor here.
Anybody can do this regardless of title or hierarchy. Like that's the
Yeah.
point, right?
Yeah.
You can be a protector and connector without being the business owner, without being the leader, without being the team. Like you don't, however, you can still facilitate that energy, right? And it's the
Yeah.
spaces that we walk into, right? You've heard of those people that people describe as like, man, when you walk in the room, like even if you don't say a word, I know you're there, right? It's because their energy is so open, it's so vibrant, right? And often people feel safe around those individuals because there's just a calm presence. Okay.
Mhm.
And so we can be protectors and connectors to facilitate the energy in any room. And the most simplistic way that we can boil this down is we all have the ability to be the thermostat, not the thermometer.
I was thinking about this the other day, Brian. I think it was yesterday. My family teases me sometimes. Sometimes I am ready to laugh with it. I just roll with it. And
Mhm.
other times I get defensive. And I was like, when do I get defensive? Right? It's like when I feel like I haven't done something that I wanted
Mhm.
to do in that
Yeah.
arena. Right? I was in front of a team this morning, right? They're questioning me on the content. We're talking things through, right? Where do I feel defensive? Where I'm like, yeah, right? I just demonstrated that, and that part wasn't perfect. When
Mhm.
we're willing to admit our mistakes and say, yeah, this is who I am, my strengths, not my strengths, all the
Yeah.
things about me,
Yep.
then yeah, we're able to drop that armor.
You're exactly right. And I mean, it's also the big distinction between like wanting to be right versus
Uh-huh.
wanting to get it right. You
Okay.
know, like
Yeah.
I don't care about being right at all. What does that prove to anything? All it does is
Yeah.
create fighting. What I
Yeah.
do care about is getting it right.
Yeah.
Right. Which also means that, like, I realize I'm human. I don't see everything. I make mistakes. But to even your point, it's like, what are those areas that we get defensive? I just had a call with a client today. He has been at the highest of high levels of private security. So he works with like literally billionaires and celebrities and some big names that people are known. And I'm having him start to go through and start to just observe like moments of trigger. And then we're starting to associate physiological patterns to them so that we can bring them into a place of conscious awareness. And we unpacked the situation today where he was basically talking about it's like anytime I feel like I'm being questioned, no
Mm.
matter if it's right or wrong, if I feel like I have to justify, I have to explain. He said it could be an answer, it could be something I want to like spend money on, it could be, he said, all of these pieces. Well, it went through this whole process. We've now been working together for a while, but what did he realize?
Okay.
He was able to connect just by putting intention to recognizing the patterns that he was getting that way proactively for a measly $300 investment. And he was afraid to talk to his wife about it because he didn't want to be criticized. He didn't want to have to defend. He's anticipating this, like, it's going to be a difficult, he's like, $300. It's not even a rounding error in our house. Like, right. Like good. But yet he's going in. And
Okay.
so he caught himself. And this was another example. Had he walked in there defensive with armor, what energy would she get?
Yeah.
Right? If he felt like he was going to have to justify it, right? It's like that scarce energy. When you're getting a salesperson that you know they don't have a lot of deals and they need this one to make their payroll, they are trying really hard, right? And you feel all that energy. That's armor. Okay. So what did he do instead? He was able to go in and be like, okay, let's just see what happens.
Yeah.
He told her and she was like, oh, that sounds fun. Cool. When do you start? In reality, it wasn't even an issue. But
Yeah.
that was the cellular memory from all the times as a kid that he didn't have the tasks that got followed through, or the teachers told him that he wasn't smart enough, or right, his parents overlooked the detail that he had because he grew up in a house where there was one right way to do everything.
Yeah.
The point is, all these are conditioned within us, and most people are unconscious to it, which further disconnects us even from ourselves.
Right. Right. Okay. I want to talk more about the cellular memory, but let's pause here for a moment, Brian, so I can tell listeners more about you. Brian Bogert does not start outside with what you need to do. He starts inside with who you are. You've already heard it. In a world that is disconnected, Brian is revolutionizing how individuals, leaders, and entrepreneurs deeply connect with their authentic selves to achieve the best versions of themselves. At just 7 years old, Brian was faced with a traumatic injury that most of us can barely even imagine. He was run over by a truck and his left arm was severed from his body. After years of intensive rehabilitation and over 24 surgeries, Brian has a deep lived understanding of how physical, emotional, and mental pain can keep people buried, regardless of what their initial trauma was. His belief that everyone's story is as important as his own is what makes him one of the most accessible, relatable, and authentic individuals you'll ever meet. As a human behavior and performance coach, speaker, and business strategist, Brian disrupts the normative approach on how to create sustainable growth and lasting change. And he has helped individuals and companies discover and activate their limitless potential. Brian and his team live with intentionality as they are driven by their vision to impact 1 billion lives by 2045. Thank you for being here to share what you've learned personally, your expertise with us, Brian.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love being with you, my friend.
Yes, same. Yeah, and I have felt personally what's described in that bio. So when we talk about cellular memory, Brian, it can feel like, oh, that's buried deep in me. Like how am I
Yeah.
going to unravel that? We've started talking about a question I wanted to ask you, like what are the typical ways that we protect ourselves? Like how can we notice when we're doing that so that we can raise our self-awareness about it? Because I can imagine, like our brains are built to protect us, so we do some of this unconsciously. How do
Mhm.
we make it more conscious? I know I've already been talking about like when I feel that defensiveness, right?
Yeah.
Then I'm ready to get that trash bag up.
Well, I mean, to your point, awareness is always going to be the very first step, right? But the issue for most people when they start going through this process is they just become more aware of all the ways they should be judging themselves versus actually knowing what to do with it, right? And so that's the first place that we have to start is the only way that you have any shot. And I don't mean this to sound fleeting because it's accessible for everyone and we can compress time. But the only way this happens is if you can truly listen to what I said in the beginning is that this stuff is not your fault.
Okay.
Right? Here's the truth. We have to be able to view ourselves through an objective and non-judgmental lens because the second shame or blame kicks in, opportunity and growth go out the window. Should is a shame-based word.
Yes.
From the time we are little kids, parents, teachers, coaches, employers in the world starts telling us, you should do this, you shouldn't do this. You should be this, you shouldn't be this. You should want this, you shouldn't want this. You should live here, you shouldn't live here. Right? And all that does is it starts funneling us down this path until we fit inside the box of who the world has told us who to be instead of who we really are. And why is this so important? Because why is this showing up? Where does it show up? And how does it show up? It can show up in literally hundreds of thousands of different ways. However, each person is unique and different. So one of the first things that I say to people is, hey, do you know what it feels like to be triggered? Regardless of the emotion.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yep.
And everybody says yes.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. How quickly are you aware that you're triggered? Man, immediately, like within seconds. Awesome.
Okay.
What process do you have in place to better understand it in that moment and break the pattern in that moment? Right? And so here's where this comes to fruition. It's these moments of reaction that whether it's external and it creates damage or it's internal and we bite our tongue, we make ourselves small, we make ourselves quiet. Do you ever feel disconnected? Do you ever feel unworthy? Do you ever feel like you need to justify to be heard? Do you ever feel like your truth isn't seen and understood? Do you ever feel sometimes like you might be surrounded by people, but you're completely alone? If you feel any of those things, you're protecting yourself. And you have trash that has not been found and eradicated in your past that is still showing up in moments. Now, how does this show up in a variety of ways? We have somebody in our mastermind who is an unbelievable creative, like unreal. She's been doing it since 2016, has a really unique market. Okay. But she's also completely undervalued herself. She way undercharges for her services. She's constantly told that because of the way she does it, it's not going to fit within the marketplace, even though she has on average 7 million views per week across her channels. In her very first mastermind call, we got her into a place about a conversation she was getting ready to step into where she was going to have to say what her rate was and start to open up a conversation. And all of that like hesitation crept in.
Yeah.
So we used that moment to say, okay, well, you've been triggered. You know that you've been triggered. Cool. Let's get in your body. Okay. She got in her body and I said, how does it show up in your body? And she goes, well, it's like really heavy. I feel really stressed. Cool. Good. Go deeper. That's an emotion. That's a feeling and a sensation. That's not your physiological pattern. What's happening in your body right now? Now, I don't remember her specific pattern, but it was something along the lines of heart racing, biting her tongue, shrinking down, right?
Okay.
And then I was able to use that moment while she's really activating those cells, feeling exactly what I'm asking her to. And we transported her back to in compressed time to realize that her greatest shame is actually tied directly to her profession in a situation that took place around the age of 10. And by activating the cells in that moment, we actually were able to help her transport and realize the source of a lot of those reactions. Now, it's deeper than that.
Okay.
But why do I say this? 6 months later, she just landed her first $25,000 influencer contract that only requires 2 posts a month for 6 months. She has been overwhelmed in the last 3 weeks with 4 other influencer and relational type deals. She's putting together a conference to bring all these people together with overlap agreement that's multiple 7 and 8 figures in these deals for her own business. And she's been able to do this in multiple different scenarios so that we're bringing it to a place of conscious awareness so that we can unwind the intellectual and emotional narratives that are tied to it and be able to see the patterns that cause us to react in those moments, which means that we are not being present and seeing accurately what's right in front of us.
Yes. Yes. I was just working with a leader on this. I mean, she's now to a place where she's like triggered by her boss.
Yeah.
And our brain has that stored, right? And then it becomes this automatic feeling, body, emotion, reaction, thoughts, in that moment. And yeah, we're working on how do we unravel that. So I'm hearing know where we're triggered, know the body sensations that come up for us in that moment. And I'm also if we can sit in that, we can help ourselves figure out what's the history there. So what's that heavy thing
So
in
we
that
teach
trash
the
bag
5 pillars of waste to wealth, which we're not going to have time to go through today. But what
Yeah.
I walked you through at the highest level is the 5th pillar, which is move. So you just articulated it's how do these emotions and feelings move through our body, right? How do they move through our world so that we can move through them? Again, if I don't understand that and understand the patterns, how do I ever get ahead of it?
Yeah.
Okay. I have over 50 shame triggers in my world. I have over 60 anger triggers that I'm aware of.
Oof.
Why is that important? Well, because when my doorbell goes off and my 2 little Chihuahua mixes start barking and I get on sensory overload, it feels like an anger response and I am full on ready to scream at those dogs. But if I can't catch myself in that moment, take a breath and separate and release, what happens when one of my 2 special needs kids comes and jumps in my lap 2 minutes later? What energy do you think they're going to get?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all
And
wound
so
up.
these are the things that people aren't paying attention to. And you reference safety in companies. I work with a lot of large construction, a lot of healthcare companies that promote safety as like one of our number 1 tenets, right? But they don't contemplate the fact that this has to go beyond physical safety in those environments.
Yeah.
And this idea of intellectual and emotional safety is real because guess what? I was just working with a heavy surface contractor that operates heavy equipment. What happens if that person gets into a fight with his spouse, finds out that his brother or sister has cancer the night before, gets into a near car accident, and then they get in that piece of heavy equipment? Do you really think they're going to be as present and capable of performing their job to make everyone else safe with that environment? No.
No, highly
But we don't look at
distracted.
it that way, right?
Yeah. So Brian, let's say that there is a team leader. They've got a team, 5 to 8 folks, and they're like, yeah, I want to feel more connected with my team members, right? We're working on a surface level here. It's very transactional. I'd love to have more meaningful relationships, but we're remote and and we're moving quickly. What would you suggest?
So I believe that the glue that binds human connection is a combination of vulnerability, authenticity, and emotion.
Yeah.
That does not mean wear your heart on your sleeve. And that does not mean that you have to be fully transparent with every single difficult thing in your life.
Yeah.
But one of the best ways to get people.
Yeah.
Yeah. But one of the best ways to get people to see you and understand with you and feel safe with you is for them to be able to feel like you not only see them, but that you understand and have credibility and understanding for the situations that they're in. So maybe they are all virtual and remote, right? Maybe a facilitated conversation around, hey, you know what, guys, it's been really interesting. I've been in this corporate space for 15 years. I have now operated in a virtual capacity for 4. And what I've realized is that we all have a desire to be more connected than we ever have, but we've also been more disconnected than we ever have. Never as an employee and a team of multiple people have I ever felt like I was completely alone. But I know that some days I feel that way when I'm sitting here behind my screen. I try to create meaningful connections with each and every one of you, but I also don't know that I'm facilitating the conversation in the best way to make sure that we all have the opportunity to come together. So really, I just wanted to do a check-in with each and every one of you in a group
Nice.
capacity. And I wanted to share some of my observations and struggles and open up the floor for any of you to participate in the same way if it seems like that aligns for you.
Lovely. Lovely. Yeah,
Just
just
open a conversation.
share what's going on
Yeah.
with you. If you're feeling like you want to make a shift, why is that? Share the
Mhm.
why. Share where you
Bingo.
think you might be falling short, right? And
Bingo.
I like to talk about this. I'd like to hear your perspectives, right? And then you can figure out what are we gonna do about it,
Mhm.
possibly.
Yeah. I
Lovely.
mean, at the end of the day, people don't, if they don't feel safe with you as a leader, they're never going to tell you the truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
They have something to lose. Most employees, it's a transactional relationship. Their
Yeah.
livelihood depends on their performance, which only reinforces the deeper root of shame for most, which is those of us who learn to receive love, validation, and connection through performance, which means it was always contingent upon what we did. And if now our livelihood and our income is also tied to that, why would we put ourselves out there and tell the truth unless we know that we're going to be protected by our leader?
We can only start to know that if our leader shows up vulnerable,
Bingo. Bingo.
authentic, willing to show some emotion, willing to drop that
Mm-hmm.
big black plastic trash bag and say, "All right, here's where I'm at right now. Let's
Mm-hmm.
talk."
And even admitting as a leader that you don't know the answer.
I know. I know. But gosh, those have been the moments that I have seen team members be the most inspired, the most engaged.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm thinking
it's huge.
I'm thinking particularly about a sales manager. They were in a tough situation, lots of pressure, needed to make some changes. She was ready to say, "Let's go in this direction." So she had the courage to do that, but she was also saying, "I don't have all the answers, but I know
Mhm.
collectively we do. We can figure this out."
Yeah. To the point of courage and truth. I mean, that's literally what I tell people. A lot of people ask you, like, hey, Brian, who's going to be successful in your world? Who's a good client for you? Who's a bad client for you? And it always comes down to a really simple place. Like, if you don't have the desire, the interest, and the courage to find in and stand in your truth, you're not ready to be in my world.
Mm. Yeah, there needs to be that commitment there. I think that's a powerful place to wrap, Brian. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, your expertise with us on the Courage of a Leader podcast.
Pleasure to be here with you, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, with you as well. Thanks, Brian.